All right, welcome back to All Cars Y'all. If you're new here, I am John, and it is time for another Motor Week Retro Review reaction. And this week it is the 1987 GTI FX16 Colt Turbo Integra and Escort GT, a collection of glorious Reagan year economy hatchbacks that are hotted up, I guess. I don't really know, but I'm pretty excited about this one. This was recommended to me by one of the viewers. I appreciate it. Yes, I do listen to you. And so, as always, let's grab our beverage of choice. We're looking at some decaf because it's the afternoon. Get comfy, and let's take a trip back to what may not be the glory days of hot hatches, but let's see.
Okay, now we turn to high-performance economy hatchbacks. Last fall, we mentioned that buyer interest in mini hatchback performance cars is growing rapidly. These so-called hot hatchbacks give buyers a lot of bang for the buck. They also give manufacturers a big profit. After all, these cars were originally designed to be nothing more than cheap transportation. And since we enjoy a good bout about as well as anyone, we thought it was time to see how well these hot new wave commuters match up. So, in early April, we corralled 5 front-drive hatchbacks to find out which one was the champ. We wanted them to square off against each other in both tightly controlled competition and on highways. Oddly enough, while hot hatchback designs are mostly imported, 3 of our 5 carry Made in the USA labels. Representing the brand that started the trend, the $12,227 Volkswagen GTI. Power has been bumped up by 16 valves to a total of 123 horsepower and 120 pound-feet of torque. That makes this 1.8-liter engine the strongest in our group. Though the GTI is assembled in Pennsylvania, its seating position is still very German, with great support and plenty of head and leg room. There's a tilt adjustment and a clear view of the road. The only Detroit...
Before they go on, let's jump in real quick. GTI, the answer is yes. I suspect it's going to show up as the most expensive here, and I understand that the rabbits built in Pennsylvania were not, they were cheapened up and perhaps not the most reliable, but a GTI, I love the Golf, absolutely love the Golf. I think it's one of the most perfect vehicles, and so in a bubble, that's my number one choice. You get the efficiency and the excellent design of a Volkswagen, but it's hopped up. Of this right now, absolutely, I would jump on that. I love it, and I just like 1.8-liter engines.
Detroit design that fits the hot hatchback theme is from Ford, the $8,860 Escort GT. It has the largest, if least sophisticated, engine of the lot. With 1.9 liters and port fuel injection, it makes 108 horsepower and 114 pound-feet of torque. Output is low for its displacement, but there are only 8 valves here and no turbo.
You know, and I've spoken about this generation of, if not the Escort, then the Tracer version. I have very mixed feelings, very split feelings on it. It was a Ford World car, and it was a good seller, and in personal experience, my first wife had a Mercury version. It was very reliable. In fact, I think I've mentioned on the channel before that I don't remember how many miles it had on it, but you could get under the hood and like literally just lift wires up and be like, how does this car still run? You know, but it just kept going endlessly. On the other hand, it was a slow, ponderous, heavy, driving a bathtub experience with a cheap interior. It was both competitive and absolutely not at the same time. So because of that, because it's a little quirky, I love it. But this engine is kind of a joke. And if I remember correctly, this HO version, the high output version of this engine, wasn't it like 2 horsepower more powerful than the base engine? Something like that. This was a half-hearted attempt by Ford.
The European flavor of the GT is obvious in its interior. Seats are firm with good support, but they are positioned a bit low for drivers of average height. Toyota's $10,668 Corolla FX16 is made in California, but it's one of 3 Japanese designs in the field.
Hate to interrupt again, but this is moving quickly. So I respect Toyota, and I like what this is based on, but Toyota doesn't do hatchbacks good, in my opinion. I think that continues to today. I know that people love the GR Corolla, but I just think Toyota does not understand how to design a hatchback. I mean, you look at this, and you look at the GTI, and this is like a kid did it. And it's almost $2,000 more expensive than the Ford. That's a tough sell. Let's see what else they say.
The FX16 also sports 16 valves on its 1.6-liter motor. It turns out 108 horsepower and only 96 pound-feet of torque. The seating position gives up nothing to its competition, however, with the most comfortable buckets in the test. The FX16 is joined by the Mitsubishi-made Dodge Colt. It has the lowest base price, $8,400, and it's the only turbocharged car in our test. With
Okay. So, kind of a dorky looking car. If I'm being honest, again, if you compare it to the GTI, which compared to these other ones, the GTI looks a little more distinguished, a little more upmarket. This looks thin, right? All the pillars are thin. Everything's just kind of thin. Like they shaved everything down a little bit. I have spoken about this car before as well. Let's see, this would be my best friend's sister, and she and I went to college together, and we spent a lot of time together in her car. And it was ridiculously light, and there was nothing to it, and that made it so incredibly lovable. It never gave you a prestigious or even solid feel, but it was wonderful. And it lowest base price, and you get hatchback versatility. Initial thoughts? Value leader. Don't love the styling. I just don't hate it, and it's quirky enough that I love it.
0.6 liters, horsepower is only rated at 105, the field's lowest. But turbos can provide good torque, and at 123, the Colt had the group's highest. The Colt is also the smallest and lightest car here, but its interior is roomy. Seats have good support, and with variable height and lumbar controls, they're the most adjustable.
And before they go on here about the interior, look at the dashboard right here. The other ones at least had some shape to them. This is literally rectangle with a square cut out in the middle. Entirely functional, right? Clear gauges probably. I seem to remember the ergonomics were fine. Nothing special, but fine. Just very, very basic transportation. It's hard to believe at one point that Mitsubishi offered this and a hopped-up version at the same time. And I'd like to say that while the horsepower is kind of low, it's turbocharged, but that torque is pretty impressive, as a matter of fact. I'm pretty impressed with it. The problem is, in the 80s, turbos weren't new, but there was, at least in the circle I was in, there was always that concern that turbos would wear out and the turbo would overheat, and it reduced the longevity and reduced some of the Japanese reliability. So that would have been a knock for it, a knock against it in my mind at the time.
And then there's the car with a heritage that's all Honda, Acura's Integra. At $11,589, only the GTI costs more. Its engine, however, is also the most sophisticated, with 16 valves atop a port-injected 1.6-liter all-aluminum block. Horsepower is at a respectable 113, but total torque is quite low at only 99. You also sit low and reclined in the Integra, and since the windshield is steeply raked, the driving position is the most race car-like. Seat support is good, but adjustments are few. And indeed, on the track,
before they go onto the track, let's talk about the styling, interior, and overall opinions here. It's amazing to me that I don't love the new Civic. I've been very outspoken about that, and I don't love the new Integra. But I think the new Integra is at least honest to what it is, which is that the Integra's never been more than a really nice Civic. And this generation here, when you look at the Colt, the Escort, the FX16, and then you look at the Integra looks like a complete package. Like they actually put effort into it. To be fair, at this specific angle we're looking at right here, it looks a little bit like a Pontiac Sunfire. But let's ignore that for a minute. And Honda managed to take the Civic, put a sexier body on it, a little bit better engine, and they created a classic. It is an exceptional car. From a left-brained, what they just said about the cars, it ranks the lowest for me. Now, not because of the horsepower or because of the sophistication of the engine or even the styling, but that low seat position and race car-like, swept windshield. It doesn't sound, if you're buying a hot hatch, I think the hatch plays a more important part in the decision that I'm using this as a daily driver. I'm picking up the groceries, I'm going to Home Depot with it, and I want it to have some spunk to it. And this kind of flipped the script a little bit. But Honda did it and created a car that we all remember.
The Integra zipped through the cones like a little slot car. It was the fastest and surest. Steering feel is excellent, and so is rear-wheel tracking. This car makes you feel like a better driver than you are. As for sheer speed, however, it was another story. The Integra's best 0 to 60 time was 9.8 seconds. It finished the quarter mile in 17.5 seconds at 77 miles per hour. Limited top-end torque made the Integra the second slowest. The VW GTI...
Before they go on, of course, because they've got all these to cover in 9 minutes here, so they're popping through it. You know what? I get tired of people, journalists, talking about 0 to 60 times or quarter mile trap times. And I mean, I comment on it, I get that. But if you're building a drag racer, that's one thing. This, what they said about it feels like a slot car. That's more important in day-to-day enjoyability than pure straight line speed. And that's what I think Honda was so brilliant at one time at least. And I believe that is an eminently satisfying car overall to drive, in spite of their 0 to 60 times. And I'm not saying that's slow. I'm saying that in preparation of what they might say about the next ones.
GTI trailed the Acura in slalom handling numbers and driver impressions, but not by much. There is some inside rear wheel lift, but the car's transition from mild plow to oversteer is gradual and easy to control. Its tires held a firm grip, and mid-range power was abundant through both our high and low-speed slalom runs. But lay into the GTI's throttle and the cares of the world blow away. It was easily the fastest from 0 to 60 at 8.8 seconds. And it took second place in the quarter mile, finishing in 16.7 seconds at a speed of 81. The GTI shifter is also tops in precision.
Before they go on, let's finish with the GTI there. Love it, honestly. I would give up. We'll talk about it at the end about my rankings here, what I would choose. But I would give up that lower seating position and slightly better handling for the more flexible, more torquey engine and more usable, upright, day-to-day drivability sitting in traffic of the GTI. And for when you do want to floor it, it's a second faster. Solid result.
Third slalom handling honors went to the Escort GT. While it's the heaviest car in its class, it's still very agile. Steering is light and quick, and its tires provide good traction. The front end plows mildly throughout, and the Escort's suspension feels like it could easily handle more power, which is where the Escort fell flat. With a 0 to 60 time of 11.7 seconds and quarter mile of 17.8 seconds at 76, it's the slowest car of the group by a wide margin. However, since this car was much slower than other Escort GTs we've driven, we think it had an unusually weak engine.
that reinforces my opinion of the Escort overall. And, you know, it's the heaviest by far, but it still handled pretty well. The engineers knew what they were doing and dealt with it as well as they could, but imagine if the whole package had been designed better at the beginning. Then you stick the weakest engine in it, and so they loved the GTI because it was 1 second faster than the Integra. That son of a gun was nearly 2 seconds slower than the Integra. That means it's 3 seconds slower than the GTI. The Escort's barely competitive. I would argue, initial impressions, the Escort might be the easiest to live with on a day-to-day basis, from front seat, back seat, hatch, day-to-day drivability. Not saying that about the reliability and durability or the materials in the interior not cracking in the sun, but I'm willing to bet that just feels like a solid economy car that's a little bit bigger than the other ones.
The Dodge Colt Turbo couldn't keep up with the others in the slalom. The reason? Well, the high-performance tires that this car debuted with in 1985 have been exchanged for ones with better wet road abilities and longer tread life. While a plus for normal driving, it hurts here. But the Colt Turbo's saving grace is power. It was the second fastest car, going from 0 to 60 in 9 seconds, and it was the quickest to the quarter mile, 16.6 seconds at 81 miles per hour. And that brings...
You know, when they said that the GTI was second, I knew it was going to be the Colt because of that turbo and the boost it gives as you're accelerating, right? But wow, that slalom really underpins. I'd be very curious to know how much better it would do with different rubber on it. But to me, that screams economy car with a bigger engine, not a cohesive package, right? I believe that, like Volkswagen, when they are designing a Golf, they actually have in their mind, we're going to make this into a GTI. What modifications are we going to... Is it ready to be a GTI? For the Colt, I don't feel that at all. I think that being a hot hatch would be an absolute hoot to drive in a terrifying kind of way.
Brings us to the Toyota Corolla FX16. This car did not handle nearly as well as the FX16 we tested last fall. We can't explain why, but the tossable nature and good cornering power were gone. The FX16 was prone to rear-end breakaway and was most unforgiving. It was our least favorite handling car. It did, however, redeem itself somewhat when going in a straight line. It finished in the middle of the group with a 0 to 60 time of 9.8 seconds and quarter mile time of 17.3 seconds at 78, nearly identical to our first FX16's results. Now we complete the challenge with a real-world trek. After a lot of arguing over results at our favorite luncheon repose, it was time to see the true nature of these cars on the open road. And while we were at it, we thought we'd take in some of the sights. Spring was late in coming to the mid-Atlantic states this year, but that didn't stop us. We mapped out a twisting 300-mile route through the foothills of Maryland, Virginia, and West Virginia. We drove south through a constant drizzle to just blooming Sugarloaf Mountain. The sloppy road abilities and ride comfort of each car emerged. The two cars that had the poorest showing in our handling test were proving to be the most enjoyable to drive hour after hour. The Dodge Colt took tight mountain turns without pause and was easily the most maneuverable in towns. The Toyota Corolla FX16, on the other hand, had the smoothest ride and produced the least fatigue. We moved on through the small Maryland towns of Comus and Poolesville and crossed the swollen Potomac River at historic White's Ferry, one of the oldest continuously operated ferries in the nation. By the time we got to Virginia, some drivers were jockeying for the more comfortable cars. The Ford Escort was a general favorite, despite its tall gearing and a buzzy engine. We changed drivers again at an overlook of the Shenandoah River Valley, and then headed across the gap to some familiar roads in West Virginia. The VW GTI, while extremely stable on wet roads, did roll a lot in turns, and its loud engine and tires made it less enjoyable than we'd like. A different problem haunted the Acura Integra. Its front torsion bar suspension constantly bottomed out on rough roads, and it was generally the least comfortable long-trip car of the lot. So by the time we pulled into the driveway of the Hilltop House at Harper's Ferry, the results of our jaunt were all but decided. The Patriarch hot hatchback Volkswagen GTI is still tops overall with us, even with its less than ideal ride characteristics. The Acura Integra took second place, also despite its ride problem. Although if you must drive lots of bumpy road, you may want to take a look at our third and fourth choices. The Toyota Corolla FX16 was tops in comfort and reasonably fast, even if it did handle poorly on our closed course. The Ford Escort did better with cones, but was much too slow, and those who found a good seating position loved it on the open road. Although last, the Mitsubishi-made Dodge Colt is the hottest city car. Its strong engine and low price make it the bargain in the hot hatchbacks class. So there you have it. 5 fiery 3-doors that prove you can get a lot more out of a little car than you might think.
Okay, so let's play a game. Hopefully you've played along without me saying it, of where would you choose these if it was 1987 and it was your money. And I'm looking at this from 2 different points of view. The first is I have experience with multiple of these cars, and I would look at it, sure, I want that extra little bit of power, but I really want the usability. I almost agree with their ranking, but not quite. I think the GTI is by far and away the number one for me. I think it's more substantial than the Colt. I think it's better looking than the Toyota. I think it rides better, and I appreciate the Germanic feel relative to, say, the Integra. And let's go ahead and throw the Ford in there as well. I think, and that is, I don't know what I know now about GTIs and potential problems, certainly from the Pennsylvania factory. I would put second the Acura. And I hesitate to put it that high, except that I think the other 3 are that weak. I think the Acura, looking back, I appreciate it in its position and what it represents, and it started its own little legacy. I don't love how low it is, how low the seating is, or the fact that it just does small car not as good as the other stuff, especially with that torsion bar suspension they were talking about. I would want something that also feels good on the interstate. But its overall ethos and where I know it goes to, right? I'd have to put it at second right now. And here's where I start to disagree with what they said. I would put the Escort number 3. Sure, it's slower, it's got taller gearing. They said the engine was buzzy, I believe. But it's a very comfortable car, and it was very comfortable on the highway too. And it handled better than that Toyota. That Toyota was a little scary going through the cones. So even though they said it's more comfortable on the road, I don't know. I just think the Escort was, again, looking back, knowing what I know today, it's not as good as a car. But then, it was a comfortable, felt substantial because it was heavy car. I would have absolutely chosen the Escort over the Toyota. Number 4, it'd be the Colt. And that might surprise you. That is a lightweight, no noise deadening, and if I haven't told you the story, you haven't heard the story before, my friend that had one, at highway speeds, the windows, it had a full frame door, the windows would actually bow outward from air pressure. Okay, it was not the best car, but it rode really well, relatively speaking, on the highway. And yeah, it was a little scary if you're doing slalom, if you're doing the sporty stuff, but the strength of the seating position and cheapness and the hatchback, it would make it a very value proposition, and that would appeal to me. And that leaves the Toyota. Now, I'm not a Toyota fanboy. It had a strong enough, smooth engine. They said it was super comfortable, but I can't get over the styling. And that slalom really was kind of spooky to me. I could shift these orders around a little bit, but not much. I maybe could switch the Colt and the Toyota, but I don't think I would. I don't think I would because I like the Colt, and I didn't like the Toyota. it looks awkward to me. But the big problem here is I almost want something between the VW and the Acura. Something in between that has a little more ride comfort, but that same general usability and power of the GTI. I wanted something in between there, and it just didn't really exist. There really is the front two and then the rest. The last three were all critically flawed in some way. The first two were the strongest, but almost wanted something that combined Honda with reliability and, you know, a modern engine with that Germanic, upright usability on a day-to-day basis. It didn't exist. So that's my order. Let me know below what your order would have been on these cars if you went back today to 1987 and had to buy one with your own money. I appreciate you being here, guys. Thanks so much.